How can policy initiatives play a role in building a sustainable EV infrastructure grid to support electric trucks? And how can optimized charging and on-site batteries and solar make the move to electric trucks more affordable and sustainable? It's time to hear from a panel that really knows all the answers. Debra Gore-Mann is the President and Chief Executive of the Greenlining Institute. Amit Narayan is the CEO and founder of AutoGrid. And Mari McClure is the President and CEO of Green Mountain Power in Vermont. It's great to be with you. I just want to say, just for a moment, because I think we just made a mistake. Debra, it's the Greenlining Institute, right? Not the Greenlighting Institute. Well, I just want to, I have talked to you before, so that's why I said, anyway, the Greenlining Institute, my apologies that we got that wrong. In any case, let me just sort of start out for a minute and ask, Mari, up in Vermont, if there was going to be an article in the Hill on the op-ed page that says everything you wanted to know about EVs and the grid in Vermont, but we're afraid to ask, what would be the headline?
The headline would be something around our greatest source of carbon emissions in Vermont has now become our greatest grid asset. That would be the headline I'd love to see, and the one we're working towards here in Vermont, particularly at Green Mountain Power. So we have programs aimed at really helping our customers, both residential and commercial and industrial customers with fleets, make the switch as quickly as they can to electric vehicles, both providing help with costs for that switch, whether it's make-ready work on the electrical system, whether it's helping them have level 2 charging in their homes, whether it's helping them have fast charging near them and in underserved areas of the state. We're finding our customers want this. When we talk to them, they're asking us how quickly we can move and how much we can help. And so we really do feel like this could become one of the greatest grid assets with our vehicle to grid charging station, first of its kind in the country. We have right here in the building, right outside the building I'm sitting at. And in fact, in Vermont, in New England, we had some of the hottest days so far of the summer. And yesterday looked like we may have had a regional peak. And we had our Nissan Leaf, our 2019 Nissan Leaf, plugged into our vehicle to grid charger. And we saw it go to work at that peak time and help reduce peak demand on the system. So both that and learning about and implementing new technologies with respect to, you see the Ford F-150 Lightning announcement and the actual home resiliency that these batteries can provide. That's really where we're aiming here in Vermont, and what we hope to really be a part of, partnering with our customers and others on in the future.
Mari, before I jump to our other panel, I'm going to probably get a lot of hate mail for this, but whenever I go to Vermont, I just sort of feel like maybe I'm visiting America's Scandinavia, like where everything is sort of working out nicely, and you've got your first vehicle to grid compact up there, and you've got these things going on. I guess the complicated question I would ask is, we're sitting and looking at choices we make in infrastructure, choices we make in public spending and private spending, and where we're going. To me, it kind of, listening to you, sounds like Vermont, you've kind of got it all going the right direction. What more do you need? Or is gravity taking you there, and you don't really need stuff from the Biden infrastructure bill? You don't really need more support because, basically trends are taking you where we're going to go. Is that a naive assessment on my part?
Well, no, I think it's both. I mean, I think we have been collaborating, both public and private, in Vermont. I mean, our regulators here in the state support this work. Our utilities are working on it. Our customers are desiring it. We have really innovative partners in the renewable energy community here in Vermont. And so we've got a group of people here driving to these initiatives. So that's why you're feeling that trend. But we definitely feel like we need to move faster in Vermont. And I think many of us, and many of the partners we talk to in other parts of the country want to move faster. So the pace the trend is good, but we'd like to see a quicker pace, and that's what help in the federal funding, Biden's administration, and some of the other ideas that are coming out of our leaders that we even heard from today would be helpful in Vermont, even in a place where we feel like we're trending in the right direction. We need to go faster if we're going to get ahead of this.
That's great.
The issues with our climate.
Great. Amit, you're not in Vermont. You're out in California, which is his own. I think you're in California. But let me ask you, so again, to get down the building blocks and give our viewers an understanding, and then we'll jump to Debra to help share how we make some of these future bets we're making inclusive of the country and not screwing over part of the country. But as we look at that infrastructure that's needed, I guess the thing that really jumped out at me about the work you're doing is around AI. That this isn't just all like putting up a pole and sticking a socket. I mean, there's some complicated dimensions that technology now allows us to achieve that are part of this future infrastructure charging world. How is AutoGrid helping to change this?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. First of all, really great to be here with all of you. And I think if you just a little bit of background of the company, we started about 10 years ago out of some research that I was doing at Stanford to really see how we can accelerate access to sustainable energy and get rid of fossil fuel. And the irony of the situation is that today you see more and more of these extreme weather events, which are driven by global warming and other emissions that we have had over last several decades. But as we try to get off of fossil fuel and move towards renewable, we actually make the problem in the short term a little bit worse because these renewables are not the same as a dispatchable coal or nuclear plant. They are intermittent. The sun doesn't shine all the time. The wind doesn't blow all the time. And so the central problem of how do you keep the systems reliable while you wean yourself off of fossil fuel and how do you deal with volatility is a challenge that everybody who is in this industry faces, and that's one of the key sort of central problems that we have to solve. So on one hand, with using AI and our software platform, we help utilities get better visibility and understanding of how their systems are going to work. And more, we find these renewables getting deployed on the customer side of the meter. So traditionally, the utilities have visibility into what's happening on their side of the meter and the poles and the wires, but they don't know how consumers are going to use power, how they're going to generate power, maybe they're storing power. So our platform helps them understand and orchestrate all the new types of assets, including EVs that are coming on their grid. But I think a bigger piece, and which is probably what you're alluding, is that as you look at these new asset owners, the fleet owners and operators, whether these are EV fleet owners like trucks or battery fleet owners, they are realizing that for their business models to pencil out and for them to really adopt these new types of assets, they need to cooperate with the utilities. And the utilities is one of the most fragmented markets in North America right now. If you look at the largest utility like PG&E in my backyard or Florida Power and Light, they still have less than 2% of customers. So for a national fleet owner and operator, they have to deal with 3,000 different utilities, and every utility is trying to offer new incentives, new programs, new ways of new types of tariffs that presumably makes their life easier and helps them adopt these technologies. But keeping track of that is extremely complicated. And for a vehicle which can move between different utility territories, it's even more complicated. So a big part of our platform is helping these fleet owners and asset operators optimize the use of their assets to maximize the return that they can earn on these assets by minimizing the cost of fuel, which in the case of EVs is electricity, and also by renting their equipment and assets back to the grid when the grid is under stress. And it's actually a win-win value proposition on both sides because you improve the utilization of assets and you can earn more return on that.
Well, it's a great full picture of things. Just really fast, are you involved with ARPA-E at all?
Oh yes, we are.
So let me tell you, ARPA-E is the Advanced Research Projects Agency version of Energy, Department of Energy, has just gotten a big boost. And it's and another Stanford guy, Arun Majumdar, used to be the director of it, has been out in Stanford. But it just sounded like you had a project that would fit so well within ARPA-E. I wondered if the government was friend or foe in what you're doing.
No, we are an ARPA-E baby, actually. So when we were just two people 10 years ago, we got introduced to this whole program, and we ended up for the first time articulating how we are going to use AI and big data to modernize grid systems. And we got support from them so early in our life cycle that actually our entire business plan and business model was funded by them. And today, of course, we have now, we are operating in 12 different countries, and we have 5,000 megawatts of assets that we are managing. But we still want to accelerate transition to new energy. So we actually recently won another grant through ARPA-E to accelerate our platform and take it to the next level.
Right. Well, thank you for that. I mean, I just wanted to mention to our audience, because as we talk in this three-part series about the future of EVs and this infrastructure, there's been a lot of investment along the way to come there. And one of the areas to look at is some of the investments that ARPA-E has made. But I want to jump to Debra and on greenlining, because greenlining and sort of begin looking at energy and inclusion. I mean, I just have interviewed Anthony Fox and other people and said, look, we've made transportation infrastructure decisions in the past that left a lot of people behind them, cut them out of the way to prosperity. And so as we're looking at now major infrastructure bills, we're looking at clean energy, what can we get wrong that might not be naturally in the front of someone's mind that the greenlining is working on?
Yeah, that actually is the extension of redlining, and redlining understanding that they drew boundaries around residential areas, and which restricted the resources both to the consumer, and then resources also to the banking and access to everything. And so now we find that same redlining practice was applied in the transportation industry. Right. So the transportation industry, built roads, built railroad lines, right? So when you talk about the other side of the track, you have segregated communities and who have had now disparate impact by the environment. And so as they start to build out infrastructure again, so we're just talking about electrification of trucks and that infrastructure, well, communities of color, low-income communities live closest to those hubs. If you're talking about, intermodal, especially where warehouse, and in the case of we're in California, Oakland and Long Beach, communities of color live closest to those hubs. So they're closest to the electric vehicles and the whole grid and infrastructure system. So if we keep doing it the same way, then you're still going to continue to have those disparate impact on those communities of color and low-income communities. So the idea now is to really, and it's happening, and I think it's sort of where our route was going in terms of a decentralized model, and that there's more grid edge where the consumer actually, I could put solar on my rooftop and I can create cells, and then that impacts the utility grids, because as the electric vehicles come onto the grid, that also creates, last time we were here, we talked about the arrearages and the utility debt that's happening. That also gets pushed to low income and poor people. So there's, it requires an inclusive approach this time, right? The technology advances, also the policy advances require that you be more inclusive in the visioning, in the resourcing, and the allocation, and all of that.
So Debra, my question, I'm going to ask the question to Mary in a moment, but Debra, do you find yourself in the room, so to speak?
Yes. We are forcing ourselves into the room, right? That we're involved when the regulatory bodies in particular. So in California, it's the CPUC or CARB, the California Air Board. So we work at the level where community has public advocacy. And then by doing that, we work with the legislators to help write the policy that says you must have we have there's commonly known the 40% rule.
Right.
40% of the investment must go to low and disparate impact communities. We see the health incomes are impacted, the economic incomes are impacted. So all of it is interrelated. And I think now we're approaching it much smarter so that we don't have this disproportionate outcomes that we have on the traditional. And the subsidies and all of that are federal dollars, public dollars, and even we're still giving subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. So that whole concept can continue. It just has to be done in a more thoughtful way.
Thank you, Mary. To these points that Debra is laying out. As someone like yourself, that's the CEO of a company that's got to perform. You have a public service. You also have private investors you have to deal with. Is it easier today, given what Debra and Amit have led, to synthesize these different dimensions, new advances in grid, but also socially responsible, socially, I suppose, fixing problems of the past with better decisions in the future? How complex is that process? Is it a real bummer to have Debra in the room, or is it an opportunity?
No, it's a wonderful opportunity. And by the way, I think Debra and I both played college basketball, so she's always welcome to any room I'm in. But no, so listen, she's right. The one-way energy delivery system is a thing of the past. It is now moving very quickly to a very dynamic two-way system, and we have tremendous opportunity as we decentralize, and parts of our system here in Vermont and in New England are already very decentralized. We have clean distributed generation much closer to where it's being used, and we have tremendous opportunity in that development to make sure that our programs are inclusive and are delivering for all of our customers. So when we sit in a room together as a team at Green Mountain Power and we're talking about innovative programs and what we want to roll out and pilots, we're always focused on communities that haven't had these opportunities before and programs that help all of our customers. So when we think about vehicle to grid or we think about battery storage programs, they're programs that reduce costs for everybody. So you heard Amit talk about that a little when he said it's a win-win, and it's like these conversations are actually arriving at a time where our decisions are win-win. And for Green Mountain Power, it's easy. We've been a B Corp for many years, and we focus on much more than just profits. We're focused on actually changing and using energy as a force for good. And that makes these conversations actually top of our mind as we sit around the table and come up with programs and partner with our customers.
I want to jump to Amit again, but just real quick, Debra, because we're running out of time for you. This is a great conversation. Are there elements that you think, you're getting in the room, you're raising these issues, you're raising awareness, and I guess, is there, I know this sounds silly, is there a killer app for it? I mean, is there, I know you can go person by person, company by company. Is there something you need to happen at a larger level so that this kind of question, because I have to tell you, I moderate a lot of stuff, impact of COVID on, communities that have been neglected, looking at transportation. This is a story that's replicated over and over and over again. And so I guess my question is, what would help you amplify this at a higher level in a more viral way than just the Greenlining Institute going door by door?
Yeah, well, it's already going to be consumer driven. They're almost like if you survey communities of color or low income communities, they're more likely to want to use alternative energy, have available those resources. So can you imagine if you allow everybody to say, where do you want your utility bill? You get to say, I want 40% coming from solar. I want 2% coming from wind, that you actually have this very consumer-driven demand. It's going to alter the way that the industry actually sets up and operates. So I think it's the evolution that's coming already, and to amplify it though, and to mine the communities that are dislocated has happened because of the interconnecting this to the health industry, right? So you're impacting that industry. So they're motivated to see a grid that's more effective. It's impacting the energy sector and the utility, which some would argue it's a right to have power and water. And it's impacting the economic. So the objectives and the goals are aligning in such a way that you can't be exclusionary. You just can't. It's just too difficult to say, I'm just going to go that one way and maximize shareholders' wealth, for example, or be neglectful of certain communities. And then you're going to have to pay that price in another part of the way that you operate your business or the way that we operate utilities in general, or our transportation, in fact, in general.
That's so powerful. Amit, I'm just going to ask you finally, in your world, and I should tell our audience that AutoGrid Systems last year was named the best virtual power plant platform in the world, which sounds like a big deal to me. I hope it was a big deal to you. But when you're kind of looking at what's missing, I think the thing I'm always looking for is a question of what else is needed. What do we do to scale what you're doing? How can we take what's happening in Vermont, or how can we take Greenlining, but how can we make the reality of EV charging and dealing with the realities of renewables, as you said, that are consistent, and use AI in this? Is AutoGrid everywhere the answer, or are there other public policy pieces of this or private-public partnerships that you think that would help enhance this story?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Debbie in that in the end, it's all about empowering the customers. And I think this transformation has already started happening. I think there are still significant barriers in treating what we call customer-owned resources, whether these are EVs or batteries, on par with what are traditionally utility-owned large-scale resources, whether these are renewables or fossil plants. And just in terms of statistics, it's actually eye-opening that 20% of all the generating resources in the country, which is $500 billion of infrastructure, are used for less than 5% of the hours, but yet they create 20% of all emissions. And 50% of these power plants, so-called peaker plants, are in disadvantaged communities. So the emissions that are coming out of these are disproportionately impacting low-income communities and vulnerable parts of the population. Now, all of these can be replaced by a much more cost-effective, much more versatile type of asset, which is what we call virtual power plants, which is an aggregation of customer-owned assets, which could be anything from a battery to a fleet of EVs to even a thermostat for your AC systems. If you aggregate this and you treat it as a power plant, as a peaker plant, it's lower cost, it is zero emissions, and it is actually able to provide more services than a large-scale power plant can provide. And it's actually, it turns out, more resilient because there is no single point of failure. I mean, it's not that one attack or one network failure can bring the whole system down. So I think there is really no trade-off. I think the main thing that and it doesn't really require any subsidies, because participation of assets into VPPs is a subsidy of its own. It's a market-driven revenue stream that makes these assets more valuable for asset owners. I think the main thing that we are looking for now is to create awareness in the policymakers' eyes, so that they are not just funding infrastructure, but they are making rules which allow these new types of resources that you may not be able to touch and feel the same way you can touch and feel your natural gas plants, participate in the markets on an even playing field, essentially. And I think there is a lot of regulation that has happened. The implementation of that is yet to be seen. But I think there are more and more mechanisms for these assets to participate in wholesale markets, and certainly forward-looking utilities like Mari's and others are creating more opportunities for these assets to provide value, so that not only you don't have to build expensive peaker plants, you also don't have to build the wires and the poles for very few hours and make that investment, which is just sitting idle for most of the year, essentially. So I think it's more around education and awareness, and programs like yours, I think, are really valuable in bringing that awareness to the masses.
Well, you're very kind. Well, I mean, I've learned so much about e-trucks and grids, and I love the way that Mary opened by saying, hey, we've moved from one of the areas of biggest emissions in the state of Vermont to, the biggest set of opportunities in creating, a clean environment. So we're going to stay on this e-truck and e-trucking, e-grid story, and also keep on the issue of how do we keep inclusion a key anchor of it. And so I want to thank Debra Gore-Mann, President and CEO of the Greenlining Institute, Amit Narayan, CEO and founder of AutoGrid. Be sure to tell my friend from former director of ARPA-E I said hi. And Mari McClure, President and CEO of Green Mountain Power. Thank you so much. Great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
That brings us to the end of our program today. A really big thank you to the Environmental Defense Fund for its support and all of you attendees for joining us for this discussion. For any of you who missed these conversations, and they're great, we're going to have the video from the entire event on our website shortly. I'm Steve Clemons. Be well.